My daughter, May, has recently discovered that toy stores exist. This is a problem, because now, every time we go anywhere that even vaguely resembles a place where toys might be sold, she suddenly develops a very intense emotional connection to something she saw approximately 5 seconds ago. Most of the time, I can steer her away before things escalate. But last month, she found something I unfortunately could not argue against. It happened at a salvage yard about 20 minutes outside of Oak Haven. My wife loves those places. Old kitchen stuff, antique picture frames, things that somehow cost more because they're older. May is 6, which means salvage yards usually bore her to death. She spends the first half hour dragging her feet behind us, while my wife looks through tables and boxes full of things that apparently belonged in someone else's house 30 years ago. Eventually, May finds something she can pick up. That morning, she found it sitting on a folding table between a cardboard box full of plastic dinosaurs and a pile of stuffed animals that looked like they had survived several generations of children. It was a Furby. Now look, I know people joke about those things being creepy, but I remember when they first came out. Every kid wanted one. I never actually owned one myself, so when May picked it up and immediately started laughing at the weird noises it made, I didn't really think much about it. The guy running the table said we could take it for $2. May looked at me with that hopeful face kids instantly produce when they think they're about to hear the word no. $2 seemed like a small price to make her happy for the rest of the day. So I paid the man and we went home with what May had already decided was her new best friend. She named it Lev before we even pulled into the driveway. The toy looked a little worn, but otherwise fine. Some thin patches in the fur. One eyelid blinked slightly slower than the other. But when May put batteries in it, the thing immediately came to life and started speaking in that weird nonsense language they all seem to know. For the next hour, she sat on her bedroom floor, talking to it, while my wife and I made dinner downstairs. Every now and then, we could hear her laughing through the hallway. At one point, she came running into the kitchen just to show us that it could dance if we tickled its stomach. I remember thinking it might have been the best $2 I'd spent in a long time. That night when I tucked May into bed, she asked if Lev could stay in her room. I didn't see any reason to say no, so I placed the toy on the dresser across from her bed, turned off the lights, and closed the door while she was already halfway asleep. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke up because I thought I heard her talking. At first, I didn't get out of bed. Kids talk in their sleep sometimes, and May had done that before. But after lying there for a minute, I realized the voice I was hearing sounded strange. It had that slightly mechanical tone toys make when the batteries are starting to die. So I got up and walked down the hallway. When I opened May's door, the room was dark except for the small nightlight beside her bed. She was asleep under the blanket, breathing slowly, and the Furby was sitting on the dresser exactly where I had left it. Its eyes opened. Then it made a soft, giggling sound. I figured the thing must have turned itself on somehow. Considering how old it probably was, that didn't seem impossible, so I picked it up, opened the battery compartment, and removed the batteries before setting it back down. The eyes closed immediately, and the toy went quiet. Problem solved. Or so I thought. The following night, I heard the sound again. This time, it wasn't laughter. It sounded more like whispering, very faint, but definitely coming from May's room. I got out of bed and walked down the hallway, thinking maybe the batteries hadn't been completely dead the night before, and the toy had somehow managed to start itself again. When I opened the door, the room looked exactly the way I had left it. May was asleep, the nightlight was still glowing beside her bed, and the dresser stood across the room where it always had. Except the Furby wasn't on it. For a moment, I assumed May must have knocked it over earlier, and I simply hadn't noticed. Then I saw it. The toy was sitting on the floor near the foot of her bed. That alone didn't bother me. Kids move toys around all the time. What bothered me was that it was facing the doorway. Its eyes were open. The whispering stopped the moment I stepped into the room. I picked the toy up and checked the battery compartment again just to make sure I hadn't imagined removing them the night before. It was still empty. I stood there for a while listening to May breathing before finally putting the toy back on the dresser and going to bed. By morning, everything felt a little less strange. May woke up in a good mood and immediately carried Lev downstairs with her, talking to it while my wife and I spent most of the morning cleaning the house. For most of the day, nothing seemed out of place. May sat in the living room with the toy beside her while she colored, occasionally pressing its stomach to see if it would start talking again. Without batteries, it stayed quiet, which was reassuring enough that I eventually stopped thinking about it. At one point, May asked if we had seen our neighbor's cat. It was a big orange thing that wandered through everyone's yard and usually ended up sleeping somewhere near our back fence. I told her I hadn't seen it that day, and the question didn't really stick with me at the time. Later that evening, after dinner, I took the Furby out of May's room and put it in the hallway closet. I didn't tell her the real reason. I just said Lev probably needed a rest for the night. She looked disappointed but didn't argue, which I took as a small victory. Sometime after 1 a.m., I woke up to a faint rustling sound coming from the yard behind the house. That night was warm enough that we left the bedroom window open, and the sound really travels in the dead of night. At first, I stayed in bed, listening, trying to decide whether it was just something moving along the fence line. The noise continued for several seconds, uneven and shifting, like something moving through the grass. Then I heard the whispering again. It was the same one I had heard the night before. It was a thin, uneven murmur that drifted through the open window. I got out of bed and walked to the back door. The moment I stepped outside, the sound stopped. The yard was still and quiet, the grass barely moving in the faint breeze coming through the alley behind the houses. I walked along the fence line and looked around for a minute or two, but didn't see anything out of place. Eventually, I went back inside and closed the door, telling myself it had probably been a stray animal passing through. The next morning, our neighbor knocked on the door. He asked if we had seen his cat. Apparently, it hadn't come home for more than a day. The two of us walked around the yard for a while, checking along the fence and behind the shed before we found it lying in the grass near the back corner of the yard. Something had gotten to it during the night. The orange fur around it was flattened into the dirt and the body looked badly torn up. My neighbor let out a quiet sigh and rubbed the back of his neck while he looked at it. We both stood there, trying to figure out what could have done it. The strange part was that nothing about it made sense for this neighborhood. We don't live near woods, and the dogs around here are all pets that belong to families on the street. My neighbor didn't say much after that. He looked at the damage for a long moment and muttered that maybe a raccoon or a coyote had passed through during the night, though neither of us had ever seen one anywhere near the neighborhood. We ended up digging a small hole near the edge of his yard and burying what was left of the cat before either of us went back inside. I didn't mention the noises I had heard during the night. That afternoon, May spent most of her time in the living room coloring while my wife worked in the kitchen. The Furby stayed in the hallway closet where I had left it, and I tried not to think about it too much. Later that evening, after tucking May into bed and finishing up my work, I heard the whispering again. This time it wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from the hallway. I stepped out of my study and listened for a moment. The sound was faint, but it was definitely coming from the closet where I had left the toy. When I opened the door, the whispering stopped immediately. Inside the closet, the Furby was sitting on the shelf where I had placed it. Its eyes closed a second later. The plastic beak twitched slightly, as if something inside it had just finished moving. For a moment, I could have sworn the toy had been looking straight at me before it went still. I reached in and picked it up. The battery compartment was still empty, but around the edge of its beak, there were several short strands of orange hair caught between the plastic seams, and something dark had dried along the corner. When I saw the fur caught along the edge of the beak, something in my stomach dropped. I stood there in the hallway holding the toy for a while, turning it slightly in the light and trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But the more I looked at it, the harder it became to ignore the feeling that something about the situation had already gone too far. I didn't want that thing anywhere near May. So later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I took it outside. I walked a couple of blocks down the street with the toy tucked under my arm until I found a garbage bin sitting behind a row of townhouses. I dropped it inside, made sure it landed near the bottom, and stood there for a second, listening to the lid settle back into place. Then I went home. For the next 2 days, nothing happened. May asked about Lev once or twice, and I told her the same thing both times, that it had stopped working and I was going to take it somewhere to see if it could be fixed. She looked disappointed but didn't push it. By the second evening, I had almost convinced myself that the whole thing had just been a series of strange coincidences that I'd allowed to get into my head. That night, I was sitting in my study finishing up some work when I suddenly heard May laughing and squealing with excitement from down the hallway. I walked toward her room, expecting to find her playing with something she wasn't supposed to have taken off a shelf. Instead, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor with Lev in her lap. She looked up at me with a huge grin. "Daddy, thank you for fixing him." For a second, I didn't say anything. The toy looked different. The thin patches in the fur that I had noticed the day we bought it were gone. The fur looked thicker, almost clean, like it had just come out of a box. May held it up happily. "See, he works again." Then the Furby made a small choking noise. Something fell out of its beak and landed on the carpet between May's knees. She giggled. Lev spit something out. I stared at the floor. It was a feather, small, gray and white. I forced a smile and crouched down. "Hey May," I said gently, reaching for the toy. "Let me put some new batteries in him so he works properly again." She handed it over without thinking. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I walked straight for the back door. Outside, the air was cool and quiet. I stood on the patio holding the toy for a few seconds before I noticed something lying near the edge of the grass. It was a small bird, a sparrow from the look of it. It lay twisted on its side beneath the fence, its feathers ruffled and scattered across the ground. For a moment, I just stood there looking at it. Then I looked down at the Furby. Its eyes were open. The corners of the plastic beak were slightly raised, and I could have sworn the thing was looking directly at me. I didn't go back inside. Instead, I walked straight to the shed at the back of the yard and set the toy down on the wooden workbench. For a few seconds, it sat there quietly. Then it made that same faint whispering sound. I grabbed the hammer hanging from the wall and brought it down as hard as I could. Plastic cracked under the first blow. The second split the casing open. I kept swinging until the thing was nothing but broken pieces scattered across the workbench. After that, I gathered what was left, put it in a box, and drove out of the neighborhood. I didn't stop until I found a construction dumpster several streets away. I threw the box in and didn't look back. By the time I got home, the house was quiet again. May was already asleep. My wife was sitting on the couch when I walked in. "Where'd you disappear to?" she asked. May wanted Lev earlier. I shrugged and set my keys down. "Yeah," I said. "It wasn't really fixed. I left it in the shed. I'll deal with it tomorrow." She studied me for a moment like she knew there was more to the story, but eventually she just nodded and let it go. I went upstairs a few minutes later and checked on May before heading to bed. She was asleep, curled up under the blanket. For the first time in a couple of days, the house was completely quiet. The next morning, May left for school before I really had to deal with her. I stayed in the kitchen longer than usual while my wife helped her get ready, pretending to read something on my phone while they talked near the front door. I knew the moment May saw me, she would ask about Lev, and I didn't have anything ready to say that wouldn't sound like another lie. She left for school without asking. That almost made it worse. After the door closed, my wife stood there for a second, looking at me across the kitchen. She didn't say anything, but the look on her face made it pretty clear she expected an explanation sooner or later. She also knew better than to push right away. I've always been the kind of person who eventually explains things when they're ready to come out. Still, I could tell she didn't like the way I was acting. Most of the day passed quietly after that. I tried to focus on work, but every time the house creaked or something shifted outside the window, I caught myself listening for that whispering again. Nothing happened. That evening, just before dinner, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, one of the neighbors from a few houses down was standing on the porch holding his phone. "Hey," he said. "This might sound weird, but my dog's collar has one of those tracker things on it. It's been missing since this morning, and the app keeps saying it's somewhere around here." I frowned and stepped outside with him. He showed me the map on his phone. The little blue dot sat almost directly on top of our house. "That doesn't really make sense," he admitted, glancing around the yard. "But I figured I'd check before assuming the thing was broken." We walked around the property for a few minutes, looking along the fence line, under the porch, and near the shed. He even checked along the bushes near the side of the house. There was nothing there. Eventually, he shrugged and said the tracker was probably glitching. We talked for another minute before he headed back down the street, still staring at the screen on his phone like he couldn't quite figure it out. I didn't tell him about the bird, or the cat. That night, I couldn't sleep. Sometime after midnight, I ended up standing near the window in our bedroom, looking out over the yard the same way I had the night I heard the rustling outside. For a long time, nothing moved. Then I saw it. The Furby was sitting in the middle of the lawn. It wasn't moving. It was just sitting there in the grass, perfectly upright, its head tilted slightly back as if it were staring up at the sky. For a second, I wondered if I was imagining it. Then the toy lowered its head. Even from the window, I could see the curve of the plastic beak, the shape of the eyes reflecting the faint light from the street. It looked like it was smiling. The Furby jerked once, the way it did when the gears inside it started moving. Then something dropped out of its mouth. I watched it fall into the grass. When the toy lifted its head again, the thing lying on the lawn caught the light. It was a dog collar. The metal tag glimmered in the moonlight, slick with something wet. The Furby turned its head slightly. And for a moment, I had the unmistakable feeling that it was looking directly at me. Then, it blinked. A year ago, Lyra Keyston, a well-known celebrity streamer, took her own life in front of 50,000 viewers after detailing her harassment. Her video went viral, parents across the nation coming to a grim conclusion. Their children were corrupted, poisoned, evil, and we needed to be fixed. So, a streamer died, and we were all paying the consequences. Officially, it was called the Social Alignment Program, created for the sole purpose of smoothing us down, removing the parts of us that judged, that looked down on people, that insisted on hierarchy. Lyra's video didn't just go viral. It gave the government an incentive to cut out bullying once and for all. Literally. I really did not want a detailed explanation of what the procedure involved, but it was law to explain it to a child. So, I was forced to sit through half an hour of quirky government-sponsored YouTube videos featuring influencers telling me that my brain was going to be cut open. The thing was, I never bullied anyone's. I did tease kids. I called Senji Hora a stuck-up bitch in 8th grade. I shoved Moss Landhold into a classroom because my friends thought it was funny. But I wasn't a bully, right? Bullying was worse. Bullying wasn't me. I judged my peers, yes. But we all did. Once we were self-aware, we immediately began judging everything around us. I judged myself. I judged my parents, my siblings, my teachers. I laughed at their stupid hair, their lisps, the way they spoke slew owly. Their clothes if their parents weren't rich, their phones if they didn't have the latest model. But wasn't that what being a kid was? Wasn't bullying just natural? Sitting in an uncomfortable chair, my wrists were gently pinned down. The room was clinical white. The chair was ice-cold, uncomfortable leather. I didn't like it. The device was kind of like a halo. It descended from the ceiling and settled over my skull, coming apart like a vice and gripping my entire head. My reflection in the equipment mirror stared back at me, a trembling 17-year-old trying to stay calm. "Allison," the nurse gestured for me to lean forward and rest my chin on another piece of equipment, placing my head between spinning metal structures, a blinding white light piercing my right eye. I wasn't alone. Across the room, a boy sat cross-legged on an observation bed, arms folded. I recognized him. He used to push kids into lockers and threaten teachers. Whenever a nurse came near him, he started screaming. "I have rights," he kept repeating in an almost hysterical giggle. "You can't fucking do this to me, because I have rights. You fucks." Smoothing was mandatory, so whether he liked it or not, it was going to happen. He shot me a disgusted glare, lip curled, like I willingly slumped into the murder chair, like I wasn't held at gunpoint and dragged to the procedure room. The boy was panicking, sweat clinging to his head, thick glue over his eyes. I watched him dive off the observation bed, sprinting out of the room while his nurse filled an IV. Part of me cheered him on. The rest of me thought he was a fucking moron. I tried extremely hard not to notice them thrumming to life, foam discs immediately pressing pressure against my temples. "Okay, Allison, can you look straight forward, please?" the nurse instructed from behind a pale blue mask. I pretended I couldn't see her smug smile in the folds. "Directly at the bright flash, and try not to blink, all right? You're doing so well, sweetie. So brave." I couldn't choke back my cry, my eyes stinging, the bright light pulsing. "I want my mom," I whispered, trying to pull my head back. But my skull was already stuck between thrumming metal. "Please." I gave up trying to be brave, trying to accept it, my entire body trying to fling me backward. "Let me go," I screamed, thrashing at Velcro restraints pinning my wrists. "Let me go. I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go fucking home, right now." All of the anger, the agony, the frustration at my parents ignited, exploding from my mouth in a vicious string of incomprehensible word barf. Mom didn't want me to have the procedure. She thought it would kill me. Dad said he wanted me to have it. He refused to have a bully for a daughter. "Relax, Allison," the nurse cooed from behind the structure. "We're almost there." Her voice faded in and out as a sharp pain scratched the back of my head. Deeper. Like it was digging through my brain, picking me apart piece by piece. "Why don't we talk about your favorite thing, Children undergoing alignment tend to respond better when they're engaged." I swallowed thickly, and that sharp scratch became a lightning bolt rattling my skull. I could no longer blink, my body paralyzed. "Allison?" the nurse hummed. "Honey, can you try to say something?" Another pulsing light erupted in front of my eyes. "Speak, Allison," the nurse instructed. "We need to know the smoothing has been successful." I blinked again, sensation flooding back. But not normal sensation. The machine crushing my skull was barely an afterthought. The giant needle sticking into the back of my head didn't feel real. "Yes," I said, and the machine was turned off. I was free, the metal structures prying from my temples. The nurse gently led me back to the chair. It didn't feel cold anymore. It didn't really feel like anything. The nurse wore a wide smile, tying a bracelet around my wrist. Her gloved hands were still covered in my blood. "That's just to tell your parents you've had the procedure," she hummed, shoving paperwork in my face. "You may experience side effects, but they'll wear off in the next 24 hours. Nausea and vomiting are common after the smoothing, but do come back to us if you experience any of the following: nosebleeds, headaches, and using sudden profanity and expletive language." I nodded, smiling. "Yes, thank you." The nurse grinned back. "No, thank you." She ruffled my hair. "Don't you feel so much better, Allison?" I strode toward the door, pulled it open, and accidentally trapped my finger in the hinge. The nurse turned pale, her eyes widening. "Oh my goodness." She stared at my throbbing thumb. I knew the pain was there. I knew it existed. But I was numb. Strange, foggy thoughts. I should have screamed. I should have cried. But it was fine. The nurse pulled back her mask. "Allison, are you all right?" "Yes," I said, smiling again. "I'm fine. I was fine. Everything was fine." I walked home in the rain, but I didn't feel it soaking through my clothes. Mom threw away all the paperwork I gave her and slapped me across the face. "You're no daughter of mine," she snarled like I was a stranger, prodding the bandage around my skull. "You're a fucking shell." That was fine. Days collapsed into a blur of nothing. Days collapsed into a blur of nothing. Hours, minutes, days, weeks. My bedroom ceiling was gray when I opened my eyes. The sky was gray. Flowers were gray. Ice cream tasted like cardboard. Looking at someone was gray. Taking them in, gray. Every time Mom insulted and screamed at me was fine. When I visited my aunt, she showed me a picture of a political figure, laughing. "Oh my God, look at the state of his hair." I wasn't sure why she was laughing. To me, the person looked fine. The world grew silent. In class, every student sat and listened and kept their heads down. The teachers called us well-behaved angels. At lunch, the same boy from the procedure room bumped into me in the cafeteria. "Sorry," he smiled. I noticed the bandage wrapped around his head. Burns staining his temples. Half-lidded, unblinking eyes. He was still trembling, the trauma of the procedure affecting his body, while his mind was a vacant nothing. That was my fault. "It's okay," I said, and walked away. Then I bumped into him again, outside the girls' bathroom. "Sorry." He smiled. "That was my fault." I smiled back. "It's okay," and then the next day, heading to gym class. He shouldered past me a little harder, elbowing me in the eye. Pain struck. Nuclear pain. Real pain. That was so real, so visceral, my legs gave way, sending me crashing to the floor, my mouth opening, a raw screech suffocating my throat. I swallowed it down like vomit, blinking back dancing lights flashing behind my eyelids. I managed to glimpse him through flickering lashes and caught a single flash of color among the suffocating grayscale. I never realized his nose was bleeding. "Sorry," the boy apologized as usual, but he didn't walk away this time. I stood. I blinked. The world was still gray, still dull. "It's okay," I smiled. "Oh, really?" The boy's lip curled slightly, one brow raised. Again, color exploded, vivid and beautiful. The most beautiful shade of red decorated his lips and chin. He wound his fist back and swung it directly into my face. I screamed, this time. Numbness became freeing. Feeling became sensation. Sensation became emotion. And this time, pain was glorious, filthy, agonizing. Blood ran from my own nose, hot and wet. So wet I traced each rivulet sliding down the curve of my throat. The boy stepped in front of me, lips curved, nostrils flaring. His eyes were different, frenzied, flicking back and forth. "Are you okay?" His voice held an unmistakable tone of mockery. I straightened up, swiping blood from my face with my sleeve. "It's fine," I said, smiled, and then realized I was grimacing. "I'm fine." I turned to walk away, a dull throbbing pain striking the back of my head. And he shoved me, again, harder. Something ignited in my bones, my thoughts short-circuiting. It was wrong and right and feral, twisting my stoic lips into a scowl. Prick. The name spluttered from my lips in a hiss, carried by blood filling my mouth. And then I couldn't stop myself. I gagged my mouth, but my lips were already moving, already in control. "Watch where you're fucking going." Something hot drew me to him, my body twitching. "Are you blind?" He smiled. "Bitch." I shoved him, choking on hysterical giggles. "You look like a toe." He punched me in the face, again. I enjoyed the sting. I enjoyed the way my head swung back, my jaw clicking out of place. I enjoyed the blood running down my face. "I hate your fucking ponytail." He spat, giggling. Somehow, I was nose to nose with him, my skin on fire, my breath stuck in my throat. Something hot and rich filled my nose, intoxicating me. "Well, I hate your face," I snapped back, reveling in his breath tickling my face. "You're a little twerp." He grinned. "Oh, yeah?" I wrapped my arms around his waist, pulling him closer. I ran my lips across his neck, a shiver sliding down my spine. "Yeah," I said, and ripped his throat out. But his teeth were already piercing mine. His giggles were muffled, manic, as he burrowed into me, and part of me, this feral, animalistic part of me, squealed in delight, his blood running down my throat, his flesh stuck between my teeth. They should have just gotten us fucking counseling. The musty smell of forgotten memories clung to the air as NB lugged the final wooden crate from the cellar into his childhood parlor. The house felt smaller now that his guardians were gone, not because it was empty, but because the silence was heavy, as if the walls themselves were mourning. He had expected to find tax returns or old holiday decorations behind that false panel in the furnace room. Instead, he found the crate. It wasn't cardboard. It was reinforced oak, fastened with a padlock that looked far newer than anything else in the subterranean storage. He'd spent the afternoon hacksawing through the bolt, hoping for some hidden family history, maybe some old stocks, or even the jewelry his mother had claimed she lost years ago. What he found was far more disturbing. Inside, tucked into custom-cut foam inserts, were hundreds of VHS tapes and mini DV cassettes. They weren't the vibrant commercial sleeves of B-movies or recorded sitcoms. They were stark and clinical. Each one bore a white adhesive label with a date and a timestamp, written in a cramped, precise hand that NB didn't recognize. The first tape he pulled out was dated November 14th, 1992. He inserted the tape, hoping that it might be a family video, a way for him to see his parents again. However, what he got was nothing like what he had hoped for. The screen flickered, and NB was confused. The tape showed a staticky image of his childhood sleeping quarters, the same one less than 20 feet away from where he was sitting. The camera angle remained static, the video continuing to capture nothing but the sleeping form of himself as an infant. The flickering light of the VCR cast long, dancing shadows across NB's face, mirroring the unease churning within him. Tape after tape, the same nauseatingly familiar scene replayed, his infant self gurgling and reaching in his crib, blissfully unaware of the unseen presence filming from above. He jammed another tape into the machine. The static cleared, resolving into the now sickeningly familiar pastel vista. This one was dated 1989. He was almost 2. He watched himself, toddler NB, stumble across the room, grab a plush bunny, and nuzzle into it. A lump formed in his throat. It was him, but it felt wrong. Like watching someone else's life, a distorted version of his own. Then, on this tape, something shifted. A faint scratching sound emanated from the crawlspace access visible in the top corner of the frame. A shadow flickered. MB leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. He rewound, playing it again. The shadow was there, undeniable. It was fleeting, just a glimpse of something moving inside the crawlspace. His heart hammered against his ribs. He felt cold, a bone-deep chill that had nothing to do with the late hour or the drafty room. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe a mouse, a bird that had somehow gotten in? But the angle, the deliberate framing of the crib, screamed premeditation, not accident. Driven by a morbid curiosity he couldn't suppress, MB grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar and headed toward the old nursery. The room had been converted into a guest space, but the access panel remained. A small, square door set high in the wall. Eam looked to the corner of the room and saw a small camera, unnoticeable unless you were looking for it, clearly not something put in by his guardians. He wedged the crowbar into the seam of the access panel and pried it open. A cloud of dust billowed out, filling the air with the scent of decay and forgotten things. Eam coughed and shone the flashlight into the darkness. The beam landed on more tapes, hundreds of them, all neatly stacked, labeled with dates that stretched forward, far beyond his childhood. 1995, 2002, 2010. Alongside the tapes, a sleeping bag and supplies were tucked away. A couple of the containers were half empty and clearly recent. I have the perfect life. I should be grateful. I really should be grateful. I am sick of feeling like an ungrateful brat. I used to have a difficult life, one that included poverty. Every day was a fight to breathe. My now husband came into my life. He is very wealthy and stable and has a great reputation. I never knew why he chose to be with a damaged person like me, but he did. His arrival in my life was a dream come true. He takes care of me, and I no longer have to struggle to survive. He saved me. Everyone talks so highly of him. People are only nice to me because of him. Without him, my life would revert to being terrible. I should be grateful that he saved me, but I cannot handle how odd he is. He has a fetish for my name. My name is Ozer. He talks about the flower all the time. He filled our villa up with them. He buys me perfume so I can smell like them too. He also makes strange comments, talking about how I am a beautiful Ozer, and that he loves me even if I have thorns. He does not see me as a person. He sees me as the plant. I was bothered by this at first, but I told myself that I should accept it because I need him. I decided to do research on him and investigate his past. I wanted to see if there were any details that would explain his behavior. I found a very disturbing pattern. He had 3 exes before me: Yesida, Warsunflo, and Yil. That is not the worst part. The most disgusting part is that they are all dead. Yesida's body was found covered in her namesake flowers. Warsunflo was found dead with a mouth full of them. Yil was found dead near a garden of her namesake. The flowers were covered in her blood. It took me weeks to find this information, but it left me nauseous. There's only one explanation, and it is hard to accept. Any normal person would leave him, but I need him. The problem is that I cannot be with a killer. It is morally wrong, and the fear that he will kill me too eats at me every second. I imagine it is only a matter of time until I end up as the fourth dead ex. What do I do? It was the summer of 2016 when my parents sent me to my grandmother in her province. Mom was mad at me because, for the past few days, I had been getting myself into trouble. I didn't really know what got into me. Even though I was only 16 at the time, I already knew how to smoke, and occasionally I would get intoxicated. Mom kept telling me that it wasn't proper for a girl to act like that. But could they really blame me? They did this to me, and I will forever blame them for what happened. My parents were separated, and both of them had their own happy families, while I, the black sheep, the loser, the daughter they wished they never had, was nothing but a burden to them. All I ever wanted was their attention and the love I had been longing for. That's why I kept getting myself into trouble. It was the only way I could make them care about me, until eventually they had enough. I was sent to my grandmother's so they could finally take a break from me. Despite her age, my grandmother was still strong. She wasn't sick or anything, so she didn't mind having me around. After a tiring flight, I finally arrived at the airport, where my aunts from my mom's side picked me up. Since my grandmother lived in a slightly remote area, we had to take a bus and travel another 4 hours to get there. My grandmother's house was big, and to me, it was perfect. Unlike the city, it was quiet and incredibly relaxing. Everything was going smoothly. I had a lot of fun spending time with my grandmother. At first, I thought it would be boring, but it turned out better than I had anticipated. One morning, my Aunt Shay suggested that we should go camping with my grandmother. I was very excited since I had never gone camping before. She told us there was a small cabin near the campsite where we could stay, so we wouldn't need to bring a tent site where we could stay so we wouldn't need to bring a tent. I agreed and packed my things. After a while, Aunt Hale arrived with her fiancé, Uncle Orion. They helped us prepare, and eventually, they decided to join us. The campsite was about a 45-minute drive from my grandmother's house. When we arrived, I helped Aunt C.A. carry the food while the others got settled. We saw a local and asked for directions to the cabin. He pointed us in the right direction, and we went on our way. The cabin looked worn down and clearly needed repair. We entered the old wooden cabin and began preparing for the afternoon. The whole day was a blast. My grandmother was really fun to be with. She told us stories about her childhood while we made skewers and joked around with my aunts. I had never felt so happy. As night fell, we all decided to get some rest. It was around the 3:00 a.m. when Aunt Hale woke me up. She told me that my grandmother wasn't feeling well and that they needed to take her to the hospital. I was confused and didn't really understand what was going on. "Where's Aunt Jay?" I asked. "She went out earlier to buy medicine, but I don't think your grandmother can wait," she said. "We're taking her to the hospital now. Stay here and wait for your Aunt Jay." Then she left, closing the door behind her and leaving me alone in the cold, dark cabin. I fell asleep for a bit and woke up to the sound of someone knocking on the door. I immediately got up and opened it, only to be greeted by darkness and a cold breeze. What was that? I slowly closed the door and backed away from it. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I told myself it was just a stupid prank, maybe some local kids. Before I could even step away, I heard another knock. "Who's there?" I shouted. "Nothing." There was only silence. But it didn't make me feel any better. Fear consumed me and I started to shake. Then another knock came. With a trembling voice, I called out, "Aunt Shay?" No response. I quickly ran to the corner of the room and stayed there, trembling. The knocking became louder and more aggressive. I cried and shouted, hoping someone would hear me. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. The silence felt cold, heavy, wrong. I stayed in the corner, keeping my guard up, my eyes fixed on the door. Then I heard it again. A knock. But this time, something was different. There was a creak. "Oh my God," I whispered. because now the sound wasn't coming from the door anymore. It was coming from the floor. Panic filled my head as I slowly looked down at the creaky wooden floorboards. Gathering all my strength, I forced myself to move closer to the sound. There was a small crack between the planks, and I swear there was something beneath it. Curiosity got the better of me. I bent down and tried to look through the gap. At first, I saw nothing, so I leaned closer. And then I saw a pair of cold eyes staring back at me. My entire body went numb. I forced myself to stand and ran to the door, throwing it open, only to find someone standing right in front of me, and everything went black. It's been 10 years, and I still don't know how to tell my parents what happened that night. I saw a dead body under the floor. It was Aunt CA. Oh, how unfortunate. If only we could break through this wooden floor, then I could finally tell them. A year ago, Lyra Kelston, a well-known celebrity streamer, took her own life in front of 50,000 viewers after detailing her harassment. Her video went viral, and parents across the nation came to a grim conclusion. Their children were corrupted, poisoned, and we needed to be fixed. So, a streamer died, and it was our fault. Officially, it was called the Social Alignment Program, created for the sole purpose of smoothing us down, removing the parts of us that judged, that looked down on people, that insisted trash on hierarchy. Lyra's video didn't just go viral. It gave the government an incentive to cut out bullying once and for all. Literally. But I never bullied anyone. I did tease kids. I called Jess a roller stuck up in 8th grade. I shoved Moss Lawnhold into a classroom because my friends thought it was funny. But I wasn't a bully, right? Wasn't bullying just natural? Sitting in an uncomfortable chair, my wrists were gently pinned down. The room was clinical white. The chair was ice cold, uncomfortable leather. The device was kind of like a halo. It descended from the ceiling and settled over my skull, coming apart like a vice and gripping my entire head. My reflection in the equipment mirror stared back at me, a trembling 17-year-old trying to stay calm. Allison, the nurse, gestured for me to lean forward and rest my chin on another piece of equipment, placing my head between spinning metal structures, a blinding white light piercing my right eye. I wasn't alone. Across the room, a boy sat cross-legged on an observation bed, arms folded. Whenever a nurse came near him, he started screaming. "I have rights," he kept repeating, almost hysterical sobs slipping through his words. "You can't freaking do this to me, because I have rights." "You fucks!" I watched him jump off the observation bed and sprint out of the room while his nurse fumbled with an IV. Part of me cheered him on. The rest thought he was a moron. I tried extremely hard not to notice the foam discs pressing against my temples. "Okay, Allison, can you look straight forward, please?" The nurse instructed from behind a pale blue mask. Directly at the bright flash, and try not to blink. I couldn't choke back my cry, my eyes stinging as the bright light pulsed. "I want my mom," I whispered, trying to pull my head back. "Let me go," I screamed, thrashing at the Velcro restraints pinning my wrists. "I want to go home. I want to fucking go home, right now." "It's okay, Allison," the nurse cooed. "We're almost there. Relax." Her voice faded as a sharp pain scratched the back of my head, deeper, like it was digging through my brain. "Wait, what was I?" "Cool, why don't we talk about your favorite thing?" The nurse's voice was ocean waves crashing into my skull. Children undergoing alignment surgery tend to respond better when they're engaged. That sharp scratch became a lightning bolt rattling my skull. I could no longer blink, my body paralyzed. "Speak, Allison. We need to know the smoothing has been successful." I blinked again, sensation flooding back, but not normal sensation. The nurse gently led me back to the chair. It didn't feel cold. It didn't really feel like anything. She tied a bracelet around my wrist, her gloved hand still slick with my blood. I strode toward the door and accidentally trapped my finger in the hinge. The nurse paled. I knew the pain was there, but I was numb. "Allison, are you all right?" Yes, I said, smiling at my bulging red thumb. I'm fine. I walked home in the rain and didn't feel it soaking through my clothes. Mom slapped me across the face. You're no daughter of mine. You're a shell. That was fine. Days collapsed into a blur of nothing. Ice cream tasted like cardboard. Every time Mom screamed at me was gray. When I visited my aunt, she showed me a picture of a political figure, laughing. Oh my God, look at the state of his hair. See, I wasn't sure why she was laughing. To me, the person looked fine. In class, every student sat and listened and kept their heads down. At lunch, the same boy from the procedure room bumped into me. I noticed the bandage wrapped around his head, burns staining his temples. Sorry, he smiled. That was my fault. It's okay, I said. Then one day, heading to gym class, he elbowed me in the eye. Pain struck. Nuclear pain, so visceral my legs gave way. I glimpsed him through flickering lashes. His nose was bleeding. Color. Bright red color bleeding into the endless gray. Sorry, he said, but didn't walk away. He wound his fist back and swung it into my face. I screamed. Numbness became sensation. Sensation became emotion. Pain. Glorious. Filthy. Agonizing. Are you okay? His voice bled unmistakable mockery. I'm Chuff. Ein, I said, and realized I was grimacing. He shoved me again. Something ignited. Prick. The name spluttered from my lips. Watch where you're going. Are you blind? He smiled. Bitch. I shoved him, choking on hysterical giggles. You look like a toe. I hate your fucking ponytail, he spat. Somehow I was nose to nose with him, my skin on fire. Well, I hate your face, he grinned. Oh, yeah? I wrapped my arms around his waist, pulling him closer. I ran my lips across his neck, a shiver sliding down my spine. Yeah, I said, and ripped his throat out. But his teeth were already piercing mine. His giggles were muffled, manic, as he burrowed into me, and part of me, this feral, animalistic part of me, squealed in delight. He chittered happily, feasting on me. I'm not sure when I stopped thinking. What I do know is that a beautiful, cavernous hunger took its place. They should have just given us counseling. I was dating a married man. I know that sounds wrong and makes me seem trashy. Don't jump to assumptions about me as a person yet. The marriage wasn't exclusive. It was an open marriage. He explained to me that I wasn't the first woman he had dated during the marriage. He had brought home a couple of different girls. I tried asking numerous times about what happened to the other girls, but his answers always lacked details. Another odd thing was the behavior of the wife. She enjoyed getting to know the ladies. She pampered them, baked them sweet treats, prepared nice meals, and gave them gifts. I originally thought it was a weird mistress kink or fetish. I wish it were that simple. It was way more sinister than what I had imagined. I figured out their dark secret by eavesdropping. I heard them talking about me, brainstorming ideas on how to capture me, and discussing what their viewers would think of me. I even heard them mention the names of the women he had dated in the past. They were reminiscing about their previous killings and how this murder website made them so wealthy. Their handle on the website was The Death of Mistresses. Apparently, a lot of people took a sick pleasure in watching them kill people. The words that triggered my fight or flight response were when I heard the wife make a loud announcement. Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. We have another mistress who is going to deal with karma. I'm thinking we should use one of the weapons we received from a fan. I remember the terror rushing through my veins. I instinctively grabbed the sharpest knife in the kitchen and hid. Having been at their home in Oakhaven a couple of times proved useful. It gave me familiarity with the layout. I knew where everything was. Hearing the wife Clara call out my name in an innocent tone still haunts me to this day. The images of her blood splattered everywhere flood my mind from time to time. I don't have flashbacks out of guilt, nor do I regret jump-scaring her and slicing her open. I certainly don't regret murdering her husband, Mark, with the same knife shortly after. The memories just stick with me, the images of the carnage, the sound of her voice as she tried to lure me to my death, the smell of the food she had prepared lingering in my nostrils, and the way it felt to hold the knife and kill them. I suppose the explanation is trauma. The incident traumatized me. I wish the trauma could die with them, but it will likely be part of me for as long as I live. The worst part is that I never figured out the URL for the website. The police couldn't either. They said it wasn't on any of their electronic devices, and that their internet history appeared entirely normal. I never understood how they couldn't find anything. I never touched their devices after killing them, and I am certain they didn't delete anything before they died. There are two possible explanations. The website is powerful and functions like an entity, or the police are protecting the murder site. Both scare me. Both make me question reality. I knew my wife was perfect for me on our very first date. The thought of wondering if I would ever be happy in marriage was replaced by a calm warmth of knowing that I'd be happy to drop out of the dating game forever if it meant waking up every day next to her. So I never thought I'd be praying for her quick death. But seeing her doubled over in complete anguish, dark blood pooling across her stomach, all I wanted was to end her pain. "I know you must hate me," the wiry-haired man cooed as he slurped up his errant drool, "but you fail to appreciate the lives sacrificed for your modern conveniences." He scraped a yellow glob from his ear and sniffed it. "The world will be forever changed when I prove that the dead can be made to walk, that countless folk tales are based on something achievable." He licked his dry lips. "Your hearts will stop beating, and your bodies will only work to eat living flesh, but the brain can remain active after death. Think of yourselves as Laika, the dog who went into space before any humans and was forced to die of thirst." Then he drove a knife into my wife's heart. Her face fell, and she died without looking at me. The man spun around to face me, eyes ablaze with maniacal glee. "You don't have any power over me." Spittle flew from my lips as I forced the words from my mouth. "Sarmia was the only woman I ever loved, and I don't want to live in a world without her. You can torture me as much as you want, but I won't care. I've just gone through the worst pain I could ever feel." I spat on his face. The man didn't wipe away the jiggling phlegm. "Do your worst, fucker." I could tell that my heart wasn't beating before I opened my eyes. My body was too cold and empty. All I wanted was to eat. I blinked and stared around the dank concrete bunker. I was leaning against a brick wall with my hand shackled to a chain embedded in that wall. My heart would have skipped a beat if it were still alive as I saw Sarmia directly across from me. She was also chained to the bricks. She was also dead. Her eyes fluttered open. "Hey, babe," she whispered. "I'm hungry." The wiry-haired man closed and locked the door behind him, sealing all escape from this windowless basement. "It was worth it," he whispered in a reverential tone. "I've mastered what the greatest minds of our species have only dreamed." He threw his hands above his head in exultation. "They have whispered of immortality. I've captured it." He walked over and squatted near where I remained on the ground by my chains. "I was right about everything," he sighed with a breath that reeked of fecal cheese. "Yes," I croaked. "You were." He raised an eyebrow. "You expected the brain to keep working after death, which means I remember what you did." His eyes grew wide. "And you knew that we would be driven by a taste for flesh." I raised my arm to reveal a bloody stump where my hand used to be, my own tooth marks still fresh on the bone. The man stared down in horror at the loose chain that had once held me in place. And don't expect mercy from a man without a functioning heart. He buried the knife between my ribs as I lunged at him, but I felt no pain. We rolled furiously across the floor, evenly matched, until slamming against the opposite wall. The man screamed, eyes bulging, as Sarmia sank her teeth into his thigh. In our new state, Sarmia and I felt an absolutely insatiable hunger for live flesh. It's a good thing that he locked the door behind him. After I wrestled the key away, there was no escape. His desperate resistance made the meat so much sweeter. Beginning with his fingers and toes, we ate inward so that he would stay alive as long as possible. It took 19 hours and 13 minutes for him to die. Ronstitmore. Has anyone heard about this one online ritual? I think it was called the candle ritual. H'engerfobdeve. 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 The candle ritual. Ronstitmore. H'engerfobdeve. 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 Yeah, there used to be a forum about it, but it's long gone now. H'engerfobdeve. WTF happened? WTF happened. Ditchengerfobdeve? No idea. It just disappeared one day with no warning. H'erfobdeve. Damn. Dap 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 drop dap nor. Wait, if you know about it, do you know how to do it? Dap 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 drop 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 bay, you actually want to do it? Jop drop dap more? Yeah, I overheard some classmate talking about it. I figured I might as well do something to kill time. Apdrap dav dav. Afdrapt. Let me fill you in on how it works. It's actually really simple. Afdav dav ve. F first, you need a candle. If you can't find one in your house, try looking to see if a store has some. S anger fobdeve, then you have to do it somewhere around 10:30 p.m. and you need to be completely alone. If there's anyone else with you, or if you do it before or after 10:30 p.m., it won't work. S anger fobdeve, now you have to light the candle and place it in front of you. Then sit in front of it, close your eyes, and say, "Bring me to her." Hos hos hor. Hos os hore anger fobdeve. Hos hore anger fobdeve. I was just about to get to that part, idiot. S enagra fobdeve. Once you finish saying that sentence, the moment you open your eyes, you'll find yourself in a dark hallway. There's nothing you can see or touch, and I mean nothing. S enagra fobdeve. It's going to be like you're in a literal void. S enagra fobdeve S. But there's going to be a light in the distance, and you have to walk to it until you see a small candle on a wooden table, and this woman in white is sitting there, waiting for you. And I mean literally in white. Her hair all the way down to the clothing she's wearing is purely white. R. Ronstitmore. Is she hot? R.N. Egerfobdeve. Dude. R.N. Egerfobdeve. Dut. Egerfobdeve. Egerfobdeve. Forget it. She's going to gesture for you to sit down, and she's going to look you in the eye and ask you a question. Egerfobdeve. Which is Egerfobdeve. What wish do you yearn to be granted? Egerfobdeve. ACR on. ACR on. So like, what happens when you tell her your wish? ACR ostian gr fobdevi. You wake up where you were and the candle is blown out. ACR on Statmore. Damn, you were right about it being simple. ACR fobdevi. Yep, and you just have to wait a full day for your wish to be granted. AC are on Statmore. AC. How do you even know so much about this? ACR fobdevi. ACR fobdevi. My brother told me about it. He's the reason I got into. But get this, he had a friend who did it, and he went from a D student to a freshman at MIT and Egerfobdeve. I want to know what happened to him. Iron Stetmore. He got a degree and went on to live a happy life. Iak en Egerfobdeve. Ir ken Egerfobdeve. He's in a mental hospital. Ir gen Egerfobdeve. Ir gen Egerfobdeve. Ir gen Egerfobdeve. Yeah. And he even had a total breakdown about how there's too much in his brain, and even tried to lodge a pencil into his head before his parents stopped him, and he kept on screaming about how he needs to get it all out. Dom Ron Stetmore. Dom Ron Stetmore. Jesus. Dom Grafobdve. Dom Rafobdve. Dom Rafobdom. As they were trying to get him under control, they noticed this marking on his wrist that resembled a flame, and, I kid you not, it actually felt hot to touch, too. S.E. Ronstitmore. Is he still there, or E.E.N. Angerfobdeve? My brother hasn't spoken to him in a while. I don't blame him, though. E.E.N. Angerfobdeve. He doesn't know if he got better or if he got worse. Angrophob dive. Angrophob dive. Angrophob dive. Are you still thinking about doing it though? I'm not sure now. I don't plan on ending up like that, dude. I don't plan on ending up like that, dude. Angrophob dive. Don't you think you should warn your client? Well, it's not my issue if his brain gets messed up. Engrophobe dive. True. Engrophobe. ESN.